I cannot sing and I cannot dance, so I'll review these albums instead. Actually, maybe I could get away with avant-garde on that. What if I do Yoko Ono? Hello, bonjour, guten tag, and oyasumi nasai, because it clearly is morning, as you can tell by my bedhead. Welcome to the MJ Rose Show, the music review show you all want to watch. Unless the Needle Drop just hasn't reviewed this yet and you just come in here, because that's basically all I am, a rip-off of any. So, what is there to say that hasn't been said before about Florence and the Machine, the British alternative artist who has just proved to be one of this decade's most defining, greatest, unique artists, heavily inspired by the post-punk bands of the early 80s, including Susie and the Banshees and Kate Bush, alongside of a sprinkle of Bjork in there, as you can tell by the vocal heights. Yeah, as usual, Florence is an artist who wears her influences on her sleeve. In fact, the track Patricia is all about her appreciation for Patti Smith. She has delivered outstanding art pop ballad after art pop ballad with each of her absolutely amazing albums. Like, there isn't a bad apple out of the bunch. Starting with the Brit Award winning Lungs, magnificent debut in 2009, in which she was clearly starting to just get her feet with the mix of, you know, the ballads we know her for now, but also mixing in a slight bit of punky rock on the track Kiss with a Fist. And of course you have Ceremonials, furthering into the gothic and mysterious nature of it. However, she then went through a change on the third album, How Big, How Beautiful. Whereas the first two were all very mystical and, I say, gothic, the third one continued that, but with a more bare and vulnerable and pained feel to it. So like not exactly stripped back, you know, the loud booming drums are still there, but it was a lot less cluttered and drew more clear focus onto the emotion and lyrics than had previously been done on such albums. And she's one of those artists that has made a full transition, because that's what she is continuing on this album. High as Hope. In fact, for an example of how personal this album gets, the track Grace is about her sister of the same name, as a way of thanking her for all the years of support. In fact, I'll do a slightly stripped back and grittier environment, although nonetheless cluttered. Stanley Kubrick sure loved a good bathroom, so it's bound to be dramatic, gritty and artsy, right? No, not really. In fact, one way this gritty passion comes through in how this is Florence's sweariest album, with 3 of the tracks being listed as explicit on iTunes. Why does no one use this anymore? Now the opening track, June, instantly sets this more personal tone, starting with, of course, simple acoustic strumming, and the frequent use of I in the lyrics frequently draws in to this being a personal experience. Now this album continues on the themes presented within How Big, How Beautiful, so chaotic relationships, the falling apart of that old devil called love, and her life just falling apart and being out of control around her, particularly to do with drink and wild partying, hedonism, etc. And also loneliness weaves its way into this mix. However, as with How Big, How Beautiful, this album is not totally stripped back. She hasn't gone acoustic or anything like that. It all starts in that first few lines to set that tone, and then it slowly builds and builds and builds. That's key to every single track upon this particular album. You know, it's that initial personal setting and then building it up and up and up, progressive layering of each different sound. After the simple strumming acoustic guitar and Welsh singing, you then build up to the hand claps, the piano, electronic buzzes, and of course the angelic sounding choirs, which are so a common trait amongst the Florence and the Machine sound. In fact, the lushness of the sound is added to by the number of mega guest stars that there are on this album, including Man of the Hour, Sampha, providing piano, Jamie XX being a co-writer on Big God, and even Father John Misty getting included in the mix. In fact, key to every single track on this album, despite its theme, whether it be love, hedonism, loneliness, it never feels downing or depressing or anything like that. I think it's not about these things, but about overcoming them. Like, it all talks about weakness and all that, but the overall feel you get from the end of each track is triumphant. And so it's from that constant build-up gives the idea of rising higher and higher and higher. And that mightiness, that power that comes right throughout, that's appeared in songs right throughout her career. And is of course present in Florence's angelic, magnifique voice, because, you know, what else can be said about that? That hasn't been said before. It's just beautiful, pure instrument. Without a doubt, one of the greatest voices amongst modern pop artists. And I say pop artist, this is in fact her least commercial album to date. With most of the albums lacking a clear hook, and in fact the album lacked a clear single, hence why this is her first one not to have a track that's reached the top 40. You know, all her other albums had at least some track that had some pop resonance, you know, particularly the cover of You Got the Love on Lungs, and even with Ceremonials, where you had a Calvin Harris dance remix of Spectrum. And this explains why this album may be slightly less successful than her past few. Although in this day and age, most indie artists tend to be succeeding through albums as opposed to singles, so come on Florence! Overall, June is a fantastic opener that sets the tone for the whole album, including the personal aspect of the start and even at the end when it all just suddenly cuts off, suggesting a sense of fragility around it all. If there is to be a single from this album, it evidently has to be Hunger. One that has that key Florence and the Machine sound to it. It's like if you've loved any of her past ballads, be it Rabbit Heart or... oh, dang it. Check it out, then you absolutely love Hunger. Like, this is definitely a Florence album made for the Florence fans. Again, you get a sense of fragility from the lyrics, you know, the hunger either suggesting, you know, a constant longing for more in life, or if you're taking the lyrics totally literally, about anorexia and all that form of depression. One of the best tracks is without a doubt South London Forever, as you can probably tell by the title, one of the ones that is about hedonism. And can you just for a second appreciate the lyrics on this album, because, you know, sometimes they're a bit too on the nose with the theme, you know, hunger, obviously, anorexia, and with this one you of course have children wanting to have children, you know, talking about the carelessness of their, you know, late night outings. But they always make the such obvious lines have such a great poetic feel in the whole grand scheme of things when combined with the instrumentation of Florence's amazing voice. And this is one of the most interesting tracks in terms of instrumentation, because you also have the addition of a synthesizer, adding more layers to the typical Florence and the Machine sound and further linking back to the 80s. This is also present on another track called The End of Love, which I shall talk about in a minute. But this particular track just builds up so many great stuff on it. So of course the backing vocals, the light saxophone and flutes in the background, and of course the powerful tribal drums. Where would a Florence track be without them? Just adding so much uplifting power to it, but always keeping that personal touch there, as shown at the end in the last 30 seconds, where it suddenly just goes totally stripped back with just some howling, backing vocals. The End of Love is without a doubt one of the greatest tracks on the album. It's all about the build-up. In fact, the first minute is all build-up. You know, layering the pianos with the violins, and just how Florence's voice comes across. It's all just hard to describe in words, but it's all just achingly beautiful right throughout. In fact, very comparable with Kate Bush's own This Woman's work in terms of just overall